the roots of our monetary system, our Norwegian roots, goes back all the way to the Viking age, the year 1050. This is a policy that we have had for very long. It's basically the same policy, just a different shape. When you introduced inflation to the calculation, they got a higher salary, a higher payment for the work they were doing, when they were in reality receiving a lower payment because the value of the money had gone down. I'm very happy that I discovered Bitcoin and gradually begin to understand more about what it can be in the future for us. Bitcoin is sort of like a bridge between slavery and freedom.
Welcome back to the Freedom Footprint Show, a Bitcoin philosophy show with Knut Svanholm and me, Luke the PseudoFinn. Today, we're joined by Rune Østgård, the Norwegian author of Fraudcoin, 1,000 Years with Inflation as a Policy, a book covering the history of money, inflation, and the birth of central banks. In our conversation with Rune, we go from Viking times to today's monetary system, and we discuss the importance of Bitcoin in our quest to regain monetary freedom. But before we start, we'd like to quickly remind you that the best way you can support the show is to stream us some sats or send us a boost on a value for value podcasting app like Fountain or Breeze. If you get value from the show, please consider sending us some value back. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss a weekly episode. And finally, we want to thank today's sponsors, Orangepill app, Wasabi Wallet, and Consensus Network. All their information is in the description, and we'll be talking a bit more about them later. And so, without further ado, here is Rune Østgård on the Freedom Footprint Show. Rune Østgård, welcome to the show. It's the Freedom Footprint Show. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, good to have you here, Rune. You gave me a book. All of a sudden, I got a book in my mail. This is your book, Fraudcoin, and then there's a Norwegian title here, 1,000 Years with Inflation as a Policy. I guess it's the English subtitle, right? If I translate it quickly. You were nice enough to give me a copy of your book. And a confession time, I haven't read it yet. I just didn't have the time. But this is very nice. I've skimmed through it and I get the gist of it. It's basically what we Bitcoiners talk about all the time, that fiat currency is the root of all evil. Money is not, but fiat currencies are. And you have to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you are not from the Bitcoin angle originally, but you may have stumbled upon Bitcoin while researching fiat currency. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. I define myself as a Bitcoiner now these days after getting to know quite a lot of the Bitcoiners who read my book.
Yeah, I saw Hodlonaut has written a couple of words about it here. And this is an extremely important book. It's one sentence he wrote in there. And I think it is. It's funny because you have the same story as Jeff Booth. Do you know that when he wrote his book, The Price of Tomorrow, he was not a Bitcoiner and he was aware of cryptocurrencies, but hadn't yet made the distinction that there can only be one, so to speak, only one deflationary currency. So give us the TLDR about the book. What is it about, and what made you write it, and when did you fall down this rabbit hole, and why? And a bit of background too, please.
Yeah, I can start with a little bit of background. I went to law school, finished law school 25 years ago, so I'm 50 years old now. I have a background which is quite varied. I spent most of my time in the private sector, and I'm currently working in my own law firm in States Edge. It's a typical small town law firm. And I've also been working some years in the public sector. I have 3 years of experience from the European Commission. And while I was working there back in 2002 to 2005, I stumbled upon Ayn Rand's books. First, I started with Atlas Shrugged, which you might have read. And I read several of her books. And I also noticed that she had consulted Ludwig von Mises, the Austrian economist. So I decided I had to check out what he was up to within his field. And that was sort of my how I stumbled down the rabbit hole. So in 2008, when we had the financial crisis, I read a lot of economics, mainly Austrian economics. And I, without knowing it, then 4 days after Satoshi published his white paper, I had an op-ed in a bigger Norwegian newspaper about the financial crisis and the roots of our monetary system, our Norwegian roots, which goes back all the way to the Viking age and the year 1050. So I just explained that this is a policy that we have had for very long. And it's basically the same policy, just a different shape. There's some different details now with electronic money. Apart from that, the policy is basically the same. After that, or at that time, I didn't have anybody to talk to about this subject. I wasn't aware of Bitcoin or anything, and very few Austrian economists in Scandinavia, I think. And so I gave up sort of the whole intellectual project at that time because I didn't have anyone to talk to, and just felt the system was backwards, and this went the wrong way. I decided just to take care of my family and focus on ordinary life. So I more or less blue-pilled myself after having been red-pilled for some years. And then we got to the pandemic in the year 2020. I wrote my first book after a quick clay landslide in Gjerdrum, where 11 people got killed, because I had some experience from that area. And last summer, there you have it. And that only exists in Norwegian at the moment, but we'll see. So last summer, 2022, when the price inflation reared its ugly head throughout the whole of the world, I decided to follow up on my op-ed from 2008 and use that op-ed as the basis for a short book on inflation. So that's the background. So what's the book all about? Well, I think the most important message in the book is that inflation is a policy. That's also why I used that subtitle, 1000 Years of Inflation as a Policy. And I call the book Fraudcoin, because fraud means, as you know, to swindle someone. I couple it with the word coin, because it all started with coins also in Norway in 1050. And I've written this book for the average reader, you might say. You should be able to read this book, even if you are just a teenager, 18, 19 years old people, young people should be able to read it. And I think my hope was to write a book which explains inflation is in a very engaging way and makes inflation possible to understand for everybody, absolutely everybody. So I used some, I think it's 50 pages or something like that. The top book, the top number of pages is 170 or something like that. So 50 of the pages are dedicated to the historical development of the inflation policy. And the rest of the book is about the system as we have it today, as the system is today, and what it does with the society, etc. And I also have a part there which is quite interesting. It's about the sort of how the theoretical framework, if you can call it that, developed the last 100 years with the fight between Keynes and Irving Fisher in the United States, and Ragnar Frisch, a Norwegian professor on the one side, and the Austrians on the other side. So that's also a chapter which I think people find, they tell me that that's very interesting for people to read. So yeah, that was more or less me and my background and the book summarized.
Nice. So you said you fell into the Austrian economics rabbit hole around like 2000, in the early 2000s, I guess, or mid 2000s, and you read Mises around 2008. Is that right?
Yeah, I read a lot of Austrian economics books between 2003 and 2008.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Because I know from experience, from like my experience with reading Mises, and the reading Human Action is like the most eye-opening book ever. It felt like reading Newton about physics or something. It's like, why haven't I heard about this discipline?
Yeah.
This is like as important as mathematics, and I simply haven't heard of it. But it explains very thoroughly and very easily. Like I think people find it hard to read, but it's basically because it's a long, thick book with long sentences in it. But the sentences aren't that hard to follow. It's very logic. So, and it is, as you say, like inflation is nothing but a policy. And I guess the coin thing is interesting. You know, the edges of coins, the curved edges of coins, is to prevent coin clipping from the beginning, because that's what coins ended up being. They ended up having these edges because people used to clip from them. But of course, there can only be one legitimate counterfeiter in the society, and that's the bank, or the central bank, even worse. So they introduced those jagged edges to prevent anyone else from doing the same fraud as they did, basically. And it's when you think about it, 1,000 years. Like, explain how did the Vikings do that? How did counterfeiting or quantitative easing happen 1,000 years ago? What started it? What's the beginning of
Okay.
Yeah, banking?
The beginning of it was that it all started actually here in Trøndelag, in my region, because that was a sort of a loosely integrated region in the Norwegian state. The state was quite young then, just after the year 1000. So in that period, we had a very special law, which was called the Fraudcoin law. It had a provision which you didn't find in any of the other Nordic laws, which said that if the king, wanted to take someone's property, tax them or put levies on them, he would need to have the consent from the Fraudcoin, that was sort of the regional parliament, which consisted of the the farmers, the bigger farmers, and the earls, the local earls. And if he didn't obtain their consent and he still took the property of someone, they were obliged to try to kill him. And if they didn't succeed in killing him, they were obliged to hunt him down and chase him out of the country. So that was actually what happened in the year 1028. Then they chased one of the guy who was king at that time out of the country. He came back and tried to take back Trøndelag and the Norwegian kingdom, but he didn't succeed. He was killed in a battle in 1030 at Stiklestad. And later on, he was canonized, as they call it. He was and he was referred to as Saint Olaf. You might have heard about Saint Olaf.
Yeah, name rings a bell.
Yeah,
we had.
He was a tyrant. He was really an evil king, and was hated in my district. But his half brother Harald Sigurdsson, he managed to escape from the battle. He was wounded, but he escaped and he went to Constantinople. That's Istanbul.
Yeah,
Today's Turkey. And
the Vikings called it Miklagård, I believe.
That's correct.
Yeah. And what's the other name? Bysans, Bysans, and Constantinople, Istanbul, Miklagård. I'm sure there's a fifth name also. But I believe the Vikings called it Miklagård.
Yeah. Well, he served as one of the, I think he was the main officer in the, they call it Varinga-garden. That's the emperor's private guard, you might say. And they were very successful in many battles where they were involved. But in, I think it was in 1046 or 45 or something like that, he went back home to Norway and became a new king. And in 1050, he killed the sort of most powerful man in Norway. He situated in Trondheim, in sort of which was the capital in Trøndelag in my region. So he killed him and his son Eindride, and then he started. He built a mint in Trøndelag in Trondheim and in another city called Hamar. So he basically copied what he had learned in Istanbul, what the emperor did there with his monetary policy. So Harald, he required that everybody who received his coins as payments, the coins which were struck in his mint, everybody had to accept those coins. If they didn't, they risked the death penalty. So this was in 1050, and that's almost 1,000 years ago, and that's basically the beginning of Norwegian and the Viking Age monetary policy, inflation policy.
Yeah, but this, of course, but you said he got the practice from Istanbul, so it was obviously going on in other parts of the world already. And I guess counterfeiting is as old as money itself, in that sense.
It might be, yes. So he reduced the silver content from 90% to 30% or something like that.
Yeah.
Within as little as 16 years. So
Wow.
yeah, I guess it tripled the money supply within 16 years. Quite a lot.
Yes. It makes me think of Swedish monetary history. We had the first central bank, which was basically a cartel of other private banks that did the same thing. So they managed to legitimize counterfeiting. Basically, that's the basic story. And every country has similar stories, and it's so weird when you start seeing this for what it is, and you realize that everyone in power in every country since the invention of money or the discovery of money has been a counterfeiter. Like it's fraud, all of it, not just not just here and there. There have been periods of more or less fraud. So I guess on a gold, during La Belle Epoque and all of this, when huge parts of the world were on a gold standard, when most of the biggest Swedish and Norwegian companies were started, by the way, like they all began during this gold standard era. But that is the anomaly, and all other ages have had more or less counterfeiting. And I mean, the banknote itself is a receipt for gold. It comes from its original purpose was being a receipt for gold in a vault somewhere, and those bankers that had held the gold in their vaults quickly realized that they could print more receipts than they actually had gold in their vaults, because the risk of everyone wanting to withdraw their gold at the same time was so low. And then when they realized the fraud, the bank run was born, and the bank run led to the formation of the central bank, which basically prevented bank runs from happening by being a lender of last resort and just bailing the other banks out. And it's when you think about what it actually is and what it actually means, it's mass theft over generation after generation after generation, like you say, for 1,000 years of just theft from everyone. And it hurts the lowest classes in society the most, of course. So it's like a taxation policy. It's like a reverse progressive tax in a way, inflation, because it hits those with the least amount of resources the most. And if you own assets, you can actually make money from inflation because your house goes up in value, in quotation marks, because it doesn't really go up in value, but the money goes down in value. So in comparison, your house becomes worth more and more. So people who own stuff feel richer and richer because of this. And those on the lowest levels of society, they pay for the whole ordeal with their blood, sweat, and tears, and they have been for 1,000 years. And it's so disgusting when you really start seeing it for what it is. You said that you sort of blue pilled yourself. I guess Bitcoin wasn't around at that time. So once you fall down this Austrian economics rabbit hole, I mean, I didn't really fall down deeply into it until after Bitcoin. But if you do and you see the world for what it is, I mean, it's quite a bleak outlook. How did you manage to blue pill yourself again to not think about it too much? And was that tough? Was it depressing? What's the story there?
So the story is that I had spent some 6-7 years reading Austrian economics and reading everything I could find on the lourockwell.com, the webpage perhaps. And but I didn't have anyone to talk to about this. And if I tried to talk to my friends or economists that I knew, they just shook their heads and they weren't interested. This was sort of settled, said the economists. Didn't, and
it's so funny because economists aren't economists.
You might say.
Because they're all, oblivious to the most important aspect of economics.
It's quite ironic, and many of them, I think, are waking up to this realization now, and it must be hard for them to see that. They have studied for perhaps 4, 5, 6 years and then realize that they don't know shit about money. So, that's quite special. I would sue the university if I was an economist and I discovered this.
Yeah, good luck.
Yeah. So, as a matter of principle.
Yeah.
So I spent 6, 7 years reading a lot about this, but you almost become insane when you realize that nobody else is interested and knows this stuff. They don't give a shit. I had a daughter when, in 2006. And I just realized after a while that I needed to sort of to keep sanity, or what you can call it, and to focus on my family and my life, my job as a lawyer. I just had to quit reading this, take a break. So I took a break. I had more or less red-pilled myself during those years with reading, and then I decided to take the blue pill and just take a break from all of it. And then it all came back during the pandemic years, so 2020 to 2022.
Yeah, it's. I mean, the only reason that in hindsight, that I haven't, taken the blue pill and just fallen asleep again is because of Bitcoin, because it gives you that beacon of hope that there's a way out of this. But the analogy I'd like to make is like, it feels like you're the only non-flat earther in the room. Like everyone else is a flat earth, but it's even worse than that, because it's not only that everyone else believes in something false, it's that everyone else believes in a fraud, a pyramid scheme, and they believe whatever the most crooked guy in the room says is true. And that is just horribly depressing. It truly is. Yeah, it's weird. But by the way, the libertarians, I know also in Scandinavia, you're quite lonely with these libertarian ideas, because no one else, like, they either they find it too depressing, or they don't have time to read up on the stuff, or they're just not interested enough. And like, why do you always have to question everything? And like, it's all conspiracy theories, and why can't you just get a job and do what everyone else does? And that's basically the attitude around Scandinavia, I feel. But I found the Swedish libertarians, at least, they're all in Prague. Did? Yeah, I went to Prague and they were all there. Like all tons of Swedish libertarians in Prague. So I guess some of the Norwegians are there too.
Okay,
that's my best guess.
Yeah,
but
we have quite a large group of people who know a lot about Austrian economics now in Scandinavia. At least in Norway, it's a very, very big group of Bitcoiners. They are very active. Yeah. And they know their stuff. So finally, I have some people to talk to and share. I feel I have many people now with shared values in this Bitcoin community, and
good to hear. Yeah, it's starting to form in Sweden as well, but Norway has been ahead of the curve in Scandinavia in terms of people who've been orange pill, and I think it might have to do with Norwegian history. I know from my sailing days that when we traveled around in the fjords, they told us stories about how when the taxman came to the fjords and tried to tax someone living up a hill in a fjord, they had a rope ladder and they just rolled it up so the taxman couldn't get them. So like, so I feel Norwegians, just because of the terrain of the country, that Norwegians have been more, independent and more, able to defend their own property and not have to give in to all of this. Sweden feels more flat and more community based in general, and like but
But
Norwegians.
what you point at there is very important, and it's one of my messages in the book that we should try to remember those periods when we were independent from the state and we didn't have any inflation policy back when we had what I call in the book monetary freedom. You had the freedom to choose whatever money you would like to use. And that was basically how it was 1,000 years ago in my district in Trøndelag. They used coins from all of the world, Arabic coins and coins from other European countries. And I think they were quite prosperous at that time. A lot of trade and monetary freedom as the basis. And you mentioned the development of the first central bank in Sweden. That's also part of my book. I talk even about the precursor to the first central bank. That was a private bank set up by a Dutch guy named Johan Palmstrup.
Yes.
You probably heard about that. And I also write quite a lot about the period, the golden area in the Netherlands after they freed themselves from the German Roman Empire. They had a revolution in the middle of the 16th century, and for some period they had monetary freedom as a basic principle. They didn't have any inflation policy. It's important to remember, understand that period. And it's also important to remember to trace back to the places where these policies originated. So I write a little bit about that also, why they came up with this idea in the Netherlands, that they want to have monetary freedom. And also prior to the gold standard age or era, you had in principle monetary freedom also in the United States, where people used the coins that they liked best. They used the Spanish silver dollar, etc.
Tobacco leaves even.
Yeah. Tobacco leaves even. And skins, And so I think it's very important to sort of remind ourselves that this is possible. This was possible to have monetary freedom. And of course, it's possible to have it today as well. So that's my main message in the book. We should do what we can in order to promote monetary freedom in our modern society.
Yeah, because the opposite is much worse than people think it is, because inflationary currencies lead to the inflation is, that curve cannot be anything else than exponential. So it's a hockey stick curve. Eventually it will hockey stick away, because of technology being exponentially better. The analogy I'd like to make is like the simple screw. If you rewind the clock 150 years, there were no screws. There were just spikes and nails. And then the screw was invented, and you could screw it in by hand, but that wasn't very efficient. So if you look at the development of the screw, and today, not only is there an electric screwdriver in every home, but there are different types of screws for different purposes, and there are completely robotic factories that can screw in countless amounts of screws every day. Like, the efficiency of the common screw is so much bigger now than it was 150 years ago. And the price of the screw and the price of the screwdriver ought to reflect that. So because the cost of production is so much lower, the real cost of production. So if money was honest, the prices of those things would have dropped and not gone up. But instead we live in this world where inflation needs to keep up. It needs to be 2 to 3% per year. But as production efficiency and transportation efficiency goes up exponentially, that means that the money printing has to go exponential too, which at some point leads to hyperinflation. I mean, all fiat currencies are hyperinflating, just at a different pace. That's the way I see it. We're all living through hyperinflation. Some of us are doing it in slow motion, but it's the same phenomena as in Argentina, or Venezuela, or Zimbabwe, or places like that. So we are going to have to pay for it sooner or later, and it's more akin to rolling a snowball down a hill than kicking a can down the road, because the snowball gets bigger and bigger all the time. And it's going to crash into our descendants, and our children are going to pay for the whole ordeal. There's no such thing as a free lunch, but people love politicians who promise them things that cannot exist. There's no such thing as a free lunch, as I said. Like they keep on promising stuff that they cannot really afford. So they just keep this everything bubble, keep inflating the everything bubble, and it's very, very dangerous.
Today's show is brought to you by our sponsors. First up, Orange Pill app. Stack friends who stack sats. Meet like-minded Bitcoiners near you and speed up hyper-Bitcoinization with Orange Pill app. Bitcoin isn't an online-only phenomenon, and Orange Pill app helps facilitate the social layer, connecting Bitcoiners in their local area. The best part is it maintains your privacy through the whole process, and since you have to subscribe to access the app, you know that everyone there is high signal and cares about Bitcoin. A great new feature is events. You can now create local events and meetups right from the Orange Pill app to help build your local community while maintaining the Bitcoin-only signal. Orange Pill app is available on iOS and Android. Download now. Next up, Wasabi Wallet, an open-source, non-custodial desktop Bitcoin wallet that is trustless, easy to use, and affordable. It has CoinJoin built in to facilitate your privacy. Every Bitcoin transaction leaves a clear footprint, but with Wasabi, you can make sure that others can't track your steps and threaten your sovereignty. Just send your coins to Wasabi, wait, and your coins will be private on the other end. It's open source, trustless by design, and non-custodial. You have full control over your keys. Check it out now at wasabiwallet.io. Double check that link. That's wasabiwallet.io.
Bitcoin was such a relief in just, a remedy for the cynicism that comes with these insights, and such a beacon of hope, something at the end of the tunnel that isn't an oncoming train for once, like something to cling on to. So tell me about your Bitcoin story. Like, I guess you wrote the book first, and then Phil, did you have a shitcoin period? Who orange pilled you? How did you find Bitcoin? How big of a part did Hodlonaut play in your journey, and so on and so forth?
Okay, so I decided that I had to write a little bit about crypto and Bitcoin. So I have a few pages in my book about that, and I'm glad that I learned so much that I could be able to separate crypto from Bitcoin, luckily. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah. And but I was careful not to write too much about something that wasn't sort of within my skills or knowledge there. So
that's humble.
Yeah.
I did the opposite.
Hey, did
yeah, I just kept writing.
Okay. Yeah.
Hoping that some of it was true.
Yeah. And when I had finished the book, I decided I just have to send the manuscript to some Bitcoiners in order to hear what their views of the book were. So I sent it to Erik Dale. You probably know Erik, don't you?
Yeah. He's the guy that's
he's hosting.
He's doing the Bergen thing. He's the guy behind that. So and I met him last year. I was invited to his julemiddag in Bergen. That was cancelled because of the COVID policies. So we ended up spending 5 days in his cabin in Geilo. I'm doxing him a bit here, but with a bunch of other Bitcoiners, including Hodlonot and Avi the farmer and a couple of other guys. And we had a really swell time, just eating and drinking and cross-country skiing and
nice
doing sauna.
Fantastic.
Yeah, a lot of male love there. Well, not that kind of love, but close.
Yes. Yes, I met all those guys that you mentioned there after I published my book, and as mentioned, I gave it to Erik, and he was over the moon about it, and he helped me to spread the word to the rest of the Norwegian Bitcoin community.
Yeah, he's a great spider in the middle of the web there in Norway. He's really pulling the strings.
Definitely, yes, it's very active and energetic and so positive. So I really like Erik a lot, and I'm very grateful for the help that he has given me. And just a few weeks after I had published the book, I went to Oslo for a podcast, my first podcast ever. And then I met up with Hodlonot. And Hodlonot, he was in the court case with what's his name again, Craig.
Yeah, the man who shall not be named on this pod.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
No, I'm friends. I'm friends with Hodlonot since a couple of years back. We've done a lot of stuff together. And like last year up in Galo was the first time I met him in person, and I consider him a close friend. And a beacon, a stoic superhero. I think he has a very, very cool perspective on life. But go on. I keep interrupting you. Sorry about that.
No problem. It's nice to have people who both of us know. And I met Hodlonot the first time in Oslo. That was in, I think it was in the end of November or something like that. And I met him and Håvard Fossli, another Norwegian who's a Bitcoiner, quite central in the Bitcoin community in Norway. Can you hear me, by the way?
Yeah, I'm trying to pinpoint that name, Håvard Fossli. Is that HAA?
I'm sorry?
How do you spell that, Håvard?
H-O.
Håvard.
Yeah, Håvard.
Håvard Fossli.
Fossli. Fossli. F for France, O for Oslo.
Fossli. There he is.
Yeah.
Oh. I'm gonna follow him.
Yeah, he's also a great guy. So I had lunch with those two at the same and while we had the lunch, Hodlonot got a phone call, and it was his lawyer who found him to tell him that he had won the court case. So that happened when we had lunch together. It was such a great moment, and just to experience. When
was this?
In November.
Yeah, because we were in Prague that same day, so we called Hodlonot from the restaurant in Prague when we heard the news. So that must have been just an hour later or something.
Yeah, it must have been. Yeah. And it was a great experience because, as you said, Hodlonot is what do you call it? I call it a stoic.
Yeah, a superhero, basically.
A superhero.
Yeah, he's basically Captain America, but more like Captain Norway, more Viking-ish, more. It didn't need the serum. He's just born that way, and
Yeah. So he kept his calm before the phone call and also after the phone call. It was sort of very based guy.
Yeah.
But at the same time, a warm type of man.
Yes.
And passionate at the same time. And it's fantastic to see how he's able to combine those skill sets, or whatever you call it. My English is that right. But so I was able to meet up with several Bitcoiners quite early after I published the book, and that has been a major part of my orange pilling experience, I guess, to meet those guys, and also when I follow other Bitcoiners on Twitter and see what they write, and I understand that we have shared values. So that has been a very great experience, I must say. It's really a bonus for after writing the book.
But so are you saying that you got orange pilled because of the charm of other Bitcoiners like Captain Norway and Eric the Duracell Rabbit, Dale, and all of these fantastic personalities, or how much of a deep dive did you do into the technicalities of it, and like what's your journey there? Did you read up on it, or just as an investment, or just trust these guys, or what? Where are you on that scale?
First of all, I haven't been investing too much in Bitcoin yet. So
no, me neither. I lost it all in a boating accident a couple of years back. It's really tragic. Yeah.
Oh, that's a shame.
And the rest of it in a Zeppelin accident. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. You have to start all over again, but it's early, as they say. So
yeah.
No, the technical side of it, that's not my strongest side, because I'm a lawyer for a reason. I'm not an engineer for a reason, and not very much into computer things neither. So, but I have tried to understand more and more of it, and I read quite a lot about Bitcoin now these days. And actually, I am working together with a guy. His name is Mattis Storhaug. He's from Trondheim, just south of where I live. And we are going to make a short book on Bitcoin, which aims at facilitating the quickest possible adoption of Bitcoin.
Nice.
So my impression is that there are very many people who know a whole lot about Bitcoin, but they are not able to explain too well what it's all about. What I mean with that is it's difficult to explain it in a way which makes it easy for people to start buying Bitcoin and start becoming a part of the community. It's a challenge, and that's the challenge that I and Mattis is going to take on now. So we plan to have this book ready before the summer.
Sounds very good. I mean, that's the real trick, and like that's what I do. What I do, I guess it's just to try to explain these complex concepts in layman's terms, because I believe the best way of actually getting to know something is to try to explain it to others. And some of the shortest answer I have for the question, what is Bitcoin these days, is it's just an agreement between people on a fixed set of rules, because that's the gist of it. That's all it is. And as long as we agree on this rule set, we can play this game. And the way I see it, you can deep dive into all the technical aspects, but all you really need to know is that, could I understand this if I chose to deep dive into it? And if the answer to that question is yes, then you don't really need to. So like, could I understand elliptic curve cryptography? Well, I have the math skills sort of to to understand that. I could understand the mathematical proof of that if I got it explained. So, and that's like, because you don't really need to know the maths. You just need to know that this is a one-way equation. You can solve it by having X and Y, but you cannot solve it the other way around. And that's where the security comes from. So all of these technical aspects, a lot of them, you can do the shortcut of like, could I understand this if I wanted to, and then make that leap. And as far as trust goes, I mean, we all trust hardware. Like no one or very few people understand how a computer chip works from the inside and how a motherboard works. Like all the intricacies of it. I mean, a single person couldn't construct a computer. A single person couldn't even construct a fountain pen. Like it's things are complex, and there's always some trust involved on some levels. But Bitcoin, if you view it as just a language and a linguistic tool for expressing a certain subset of valuations, then it becomes way easier to understand. And I think the real battle to fight here, I mean, it's one thing to convince people to buy Bitcoin, but the real hyper Bitcoinization begins when people start accepting Bitcoin for their goods and services. So when you offer to take Bitcoin for your goods and services, it's not about spending them, it's about earning them and enabling other people to spend theirs. I mean, that's where the real revolution lies. And I've been traveling quite a lot the last couple of years, and you see places where, I mean, it doesn't have to be a constant place in time, because these places, Bitcoiners move all the time, and there's a lot of so-called digital nomads in the space. But when you're in a place like Prague or Madeira, or where there are a lot of Bitcoiners at the same time as you are there, all of these monetary problems just go away because we can all use Bitcoin and we can all use the Lightning Network, and there's just this base layer of trust. Ironically enough, this don't trust verify enables us to trust each other on a whole different level, and all the monetary problems they just disappear. Of course, someone has fiat. So if someone's short on fiat, we just solve the problem. There's never a monetary problem like that. And it's very
interesting.
Yeah. And it puts a finger on how ridiculous the fiat system is, and this government overreach into every single aspect of every cup of coffee that someone sells in a cafe. They have to pay a VAT tax, and every employee has to have this social security, and they all have to pay their taxes and blah, blah, blah. When we could just cooperate with one another and use language. And it's so easy. It's so easy. And when you live it, and when you see how easy it is to just use Bitcoin and be nice to one another and exchange goods and services, I mean, you realize that all emperors are naked. It's all bullshit, and it's all, as you say, Fraudcoin. It's a 1,000-year fraud that is still ongoing. And yeah.
The show is also sponsored and produced by Consensus Network, the first Bitcoin-only publishing house. Consensus specializes in translations of Bitcoin books and also publishes original titles in English and many other languages. Check out bitcoinbook.shop or consensus.network to see everything Consensus has to offer. We're also always looking for new contributors, whether you have a book you want to publish, you want to help translate books into your native language, or you have some other way you want to get involved. So if you want to help spread the Bitcoin message, reach out to us by Twitter or email. Details are in the show notes. And finally, you can check out knutsvanholm.com for everything Knut, including some great Everything Divided by 21 Million merch and the Infinity Red limited edition wine. That's knutsvanholm.com for everything Knut.
Why do you think it is that these things aren't taught in schools? I mean, I understand that from the top and downwards, that there are powerful people on the top that don't want people to realize what's really going on because they don't want to be called out. But I know there are a lot of good teachers out there. Like Hodlonaut was a teacher for a couple of years for, for Satoshi's sake. So, so why do you think it is that there's only this small minority? You said you were very lonely as a Norwegian libertarian, and I know the feeling exactly. Why do you think it is that people are so reluctant to open their eyes to this glaringly obvious fraud that has been in front of their eyes all their lives? And like, because when you see it, you can't unsee it. Like, why is that?
Yeah, I sort of indirectly, I write about this subject in my book when I describe what happened within economics some 100 years ago, when we first had Keynes and also Irving Fisher in the United States, and finally they got on board Ragnar Frisch, the Norwegian statistician who became a professor in economics at the university in Oslo. And basically he and Irving Fisher worked together with many other economists as well in the United States. And they, Ragnar Frisch cooperated with the Rockefeller Institution, which actually financed the first institute of economics in the University of Oslo. So he financed Ragnar Frisch's career, and also everybody who, I think it was several tenths of assistants and other people in the institute that worked for Ragnar Frisch to develop his theories and push forward his career as an economist. And what happened in Norway was that he were able to get a stronghold within the economics profession. So he educated all those economists who got the positions in the Bureau of Statistics, in the Ministry of Finance, and also later professors and other workers in the institute in the University of Oslo. So he was basically shaping the whole field of economics. Also on a personal level, he was a very had a big influence on the students personally. And he was quite tough in conflict with the others, more conservative economists within the university. And he managed to sort of put them out in the cold, you might say. And basically it was pretty much the same that happened in the United States as well, with Ludwig von Mises. He wasn't able to find any work at all on any of the universities over there. So basically the inflationists, they won the battle within the economics profession, and they won the they were the favored people among the politicians, and all the other economists were just shoved out in the cold, and they stayed there for pretty much up to I say until the 21st century almost.
Yeah,
and in the period,
they're still in the cold to a large extent.
But there are many more people now, definitely, which sort of count themselves as Austrian economists in the United States, also in the universities there. So it's improving. But it's 2 or 3 generations of economists in the meantime who has been educated in Keynesianism and monetarism and that stuff, and they didn't know anything about Austrian economic school. So I think when when you have this revolution within the field of economics, or which sort of changed everything, it's sort of put economics upside down. We cannot expect that the inflation policy, the monetary policy, monetary economics is something that can be taught in, to our kids in, what do you call it, grundskole. When they are children.
Public school.
Public
school, yeah.
Yeah.
The first couple of years.
Yeah. And also the economics profession has made it so immensely complex what they are dealing with. So it's not natural to teach children and the youth about this. So
it's convoluted.
It's
because it needs to be. Otherwise, people will call out fraud.
Yeah. So I don't think it's a conspiracy which is ongoing these days. But it might have been sort of a conspiracy at the time around the 20s and the 30s, 100 years ago. We're quite open to that idea.
Yeah. I'm reading a book at the moment called The White Pill by Michael Malice about the Soviet Union and the East Bloc and all of that.
Yeah.
And like it's kind of stunning to hear about how, science was the great savior of the world and everyone thought so in the beginning of the 20th century. And when industrialism happened, there's all of these theories of how to manage it properly. And this is where all of these ideas stem from, like from Marxism to Keynesianism. But it's all like, we have to figure out how to plan this. So they all come from that viewpoint, and it's never from the viewpoint of, oh, it's going to fix itself if we just let people be, because that was not. If that was the case, the universities wouldn't be of much use, would they? Like, and the disciplines of the so-called social sciences would be called out for what they are. They're not sciences; they're opinions. Like social science isn't science. Like science is supposed to be about atoms and planets and gravity and numbers, but it's not supposed to be about people. Like you can't really make a science about people, because people are different and people change over time. The market is dynamic, and so you need this other approach, and that other approach is praxeology and a priori reasoning and first principles thinking, and but I guess that's why Mises in particular was so unpopular, because it's basically saying that we can't apply science to economics. It's saying that science is not enough, or science doesn't work here. We need another, at least empirical science. I would call a priori science just as much of a science as a posteriori, even more, because it's pure reasoning. And like you run into logical paradoxes, you realize that that's not possible, and you have to figure out something else. And that was obviously wrong because it led to a paradox. But and it's so fascinating. But from what I know about Keynesianism and the ideas of John Maynard Keynes, is that his basic idea for why inflation was good was that every time a 100 krona bill or $100 bill is exchanged between two people, you create that much value and you add it to the economy. And therefore, you need inflation to incentivize people to do this more often. So you get this concept called the velocity of money. What he didn't realize is, like, if you have inflation, then like if you have 2% inflation, then every time that $100 bill is changed, it's not $100, it's $98. So it all equals to the same amount of value in the end, because you can't print value out of thin air. But what it does at the same time is that it incentivizes people to focus more and more on consumer goods and less on capital goods and quality goods. So you sacrifice quality for quantity. That's basically what inflation does.
Yes.
And that's why we have all this overconsumption, and we have all these container ships with shit from China that is shipped to Europe, so much so that people like have to open Christmas presents for 2 days straight. And you know, all of this bullshit consumerist crap that is everywhere.
Yeah.
And then
You just have to spend it as
you
quickly
just have
as
to spend it.
possible.
And then we try to solve environmental problems within that framework. And it's just not possible. You cannot have...
It's insane. It's crazy.
Completely insane. You cannot have exponential growth every year and at the same time believe that you can stop overconsumption from that. Like, if there is an environmental problem, it's over consumerism, and that's what you need to stop. And like, you need to like fix the fucking money, fix the world. That's
people want both, you know. They want the free lunch.
Yeah, they do. And I think that I had a conversation with Giacomo Zucco about this yesterday. Very interesting one about that. That's a very strong urge within humans. Like, we talked about the lockdowns, and like, people say that people can realize that you can't have a free lunch and that this won't work, but we have to do something. It's that's the next part of that sentence. But the politicians have to do something. Yeah. It's better than doing nothing. When almost always the opposite is true. They should have been doing nothing and let people take a hit and take the fall and learn something from it and grow stronger afterwards. Like that. But instead that's the way it should be. That's but we keep pretending. We keep pretending there's a free lunch.
But if we want to look at where this all comes from, the idea that you need some planners, I write a little bit about that in my book because, you know, the Rockefeller Foundation, they spent a lot of money on universities around the world, and especially 5 universities in Europe. They received a lot of funding, and they received a letter also from some professors in Stockholm, in Sweden, and they said that Sweden is a fantastic society where you can do scientific research within the field of economics because it's very stable. It's sort of we have the same culture here all over the place. We don't have a lot of immigration, so it's the perfect laboratory to have social scientific research. Well, they weren't awarded the biggest grants, but I think one of the reasons why Rune Østgård managed to get so much money from the foundation was that he really believed in social engineering and central planning. And he was a big admirer of the Soviet, of the system in the Soviet Union. And he believed more or less all the lies that the Kremlin spouted out about the economic growth numbers that they had there. And he, in a letter he wrote to one of his adversaries, actually within economics, he wrote that in Soviet Union they have 7 to 8% growth per year on average. And a few years afterwards, he said, "No, I now believe they have 10% or more economic growth in Soviet Union."
Yeah, right.
It was all bullocks, you know, because it was so backwards over there. It wasn't possible at all not having a market economy and have any growth at all. You know, it was basically overconsumption of resources and pure chaos over there. But probably Rune Østgård, he wasn't alone when it came to believing those lies that came from Moscow. I think many scientists and professors around them, the whole world, they believed in this experiment, and they wanted to believe that that the natural sciences could be used within the social sciences and especially within
Yeah.
economy.
Yeah, this is what this book, The White Pill, is about that I'm reading at the moment. I know Luke can recommend it as well. He just finished it. I'm still working on it. But it's a lot about this and how the academics of the West were very reluctant to see the truth about the Soviet Union because they so wanted these ideas to be correct. And like this, they wanted this experiment to be the shit. Like, but it wasn't the shit. It was just shit. And it was much worse than basically the whole East Bloc was a giant prison, and everyone was imprisoned. You couldn't own anything. It was very inhumane and like a completely horrible place for 100 years. Completely vile and evil in every sense of the word. There was nothing good about it. And like what Mises pointed out so nicely, like with most people, when they talk about the Soviet Union, they say, and communism in general, they say there's an incentive problem because people don't have the correct incentives. But you have quite a good incentive when you have a gun pointed to your head, like you are going to work. The problem is not the incentive. The problem is that there's no price signal, and therefore the market doesn't work. So someone has to decide, oh, we're going to manufacture 40,000 tons of nails this year. And then the factory manufactures one nail with a weight of 40,000 tons. Like, and that's exactly what happened. They had nothing worked because no one knew what to produce because there was no price signal. And Mises wrote a lot about this and pointed it out very clearly. And the Austrian perspective can give you so many shortcuts to these insights. Yeah. I know that there's a book about by Hoppe called A Theory About Capitalism and Socialism, where he describes the different aspects of different types of socialism. And in one chapter, he describes social democracy. And the book was written in the 80s. And it's like reading a prediction of where Sweden is going the next 40 years. And it played out exactly as he described it. He predicted all of it. And
Hoppe is a genius.
Yeah, and he got expelled
well.
And he got expelled from his university, and he's probably the best living economist today. Like, and other things like the so-called Nobel Prize in economics, which isn't really a Nobel Prize. I mean, the most useless Nobel prizes there aren't really Nobel prizes. It's the Peace Prize and the Economics Prize, and maybe the prize in literature. And those are the only prizes that people talk about, and they're complete bullshit, all three of them, especially the Economics Prize. But I realized, I knew that Hayek got the prize for economics back in the 70s. What I didn't know was, what I didn't know that it was shared. He got it with a guy called Jan Myrdal, a Swedish super socialist that,
I read that story.
Yeah, him and his wife wanted to take handicapped babies from their parents and put them in foster homes and such. But they had to give something to the other side as well, because you can't just give it to this evil capitalist there. You have to give it to this nice baby stealing socialist as well. And it just shows that academia is full of this. And you can see it today. I mean, all sorts of elites. It's kind of strange that when people get a lot of money without cost to themselves, like with undeserved amounts of money, like Hollywood actors, for instance, or careful now. But I'm so sorry if I offended any blue-haired people. But we can see these tendencies in everything, in media, like how these ideas are pushed over and over again. I know that when the war in Ukraine happened, there was a news segment on public service television in Sweden where they tried to explain oligarchs to people, the phenomenon of oligarchs. And they said literally that after the Soviet Union fell, the biggest capitalistic experiment in history started. And that's when the oligarchs were formed. So it was not because of the old system, but because of this capitalistic experiment after the Soviet Union. So
Yeah.
even after like the fall of the Berlin Wall, and when everyone could see that this was just a giant prison, they still to this day do not fully admit that socialism doesn't work. They can't because they won't bite the hand that feeds them. That's basically it.
Yeah.
No.
It's
tragic.
I kind of agree with you on that one. And it was interesting what you mentioned about the Nobel Prize, which isn't really a Nobel Prize, because Rune Østgård, the Norwegian professor in the statistician turned economist, he was the first one who received that prize in 1969.
Oh,
yeah. So they rewarded him for his quasi-science at the first possible opportunity they had.
It's given out by the Swedish Riksbank, right?
Yeah.
They're parts of the jury, which is laughable in itself. Like you're getting a prize in economics from a counterfeiter. Oh, lucky you.
Yeah, I guess he was probably quite proud of himself. He didn't think much about that.
No.
So, well, it's a fascinating history. The history of inflation and all the theoretical things that happened. And you mentioned also Keynes and his idea on why inflation was good for the society. And I think he was quite influenced by what we saw when prices fell in the 1920s in the UK. They had a period there with some degree of deflation, and also in previous periods as well. And they saw that it was difficult for instance, factory owners who experienced that it was a deflation, it was increased competition, increased productivity, and the costs of production, they fell, and they had to lower the prices on the products. And when they experienced the deflation in those areas, they also wanted the unions, the workers, to accept lower wages, lower pay. And it was very difficult to convince the union leaders to accept lower wages.
That's never very popular.
Inflation could fix that. Because when you introduced inflation to the calculation, then people, they felt that they became that they got a higher salary, a higher payment for the work they were doing, when they were in reality receiving a lower payment because the value of the money had gone down. So this money in what you call it, a money illusion.
Yeah,
it was important to Keynes, I think, and his. And what was an important reason why he became a proponent of inflation.
To the people scared of deflation, the obvious example is electronics and computer hardware. Because there you have a massive deflation. Like this phone, for instance, this would have been James Bond's wet dream 40 years ago, or even 30 years ago. And if someone was to construct such a device in the 90s with the same power as this one has today, that would have costed like $20 million or something. And now it's affordable to almost everyone on Earth. And that is a massive deflation, but still that industry is not dead at all. It's a thriving industry. And the same goes for computer hardware, especially the price per megabyte. It's just been going down by orders of magnitude every year. So it's, what's it called? Moore's law, still in play. Maybe that curve has flattened out a bit, but it's still there. I mean, and those industries are thriving. They're not on the brink of destruction by any means. Like inflation.
The economist would probably argue that this is due to inflation. That they are thriving.
Yeah.
But if
which
it's
is just
for
weird.
inflation, then we wouldn't have that success within.
And imagine, just take inflation out of this, and that means that people will, the higher quality of the phones, and people won't throw them away and be a bit more careful with them. That's the only difference. Like 2 to 3% more careful with your phone. Increase the life length of your phone by 2 to 3%. Is that so bad? I don't think it is.
No.
Rune, this has been an absolutely fascinating conversation. I have to cut it short here soon because I have to take my son to his martial arts class. I wish we could have a longer conversation, but I'm running short of time. So before we end, though, Luke, I'm going to let you into if you have anything to add or any other questions for Rune while we have him on. We still have like 10 minutes.
Rune, to be honest, this has been a great chat. Thanks for telling us more about the book. I feel like we'll have to have you on again, and I look forward to meeting you in person someday. Hope that's sooner than later. We're all within the region. Shame you can't come to this Bergen thing, but hopefully there's something else coming up. But yeah, the only other thing I wanted to maybe ask is, what do you think that since you produced the book, what is your view of the future? How do you think things are going to go now that you've read what you've read and written what you've written?
Well, first of all, I'm very happy that I discovered Bitcoin and gradually begin to understand more about what it can be sort of in the future for us. And I wrote there one day on Twitter that Bitcoin is sort of like a bridge between slavery and freedom. And so it's up to us to start walking on that bridge and gradually make that transition, I think. And so that gives some promise. At the same time, I think it's important to not only buy Bitcoin, but also to use it. And as Knut says, and as I also write in my book, it's important to be open to people that if they want to pay you in other things than the national currency, you should accept it, and you should even invite them to do that. So when I sell my used things, skis and bikes, which I have no use for anymore, I tell the buyers, those who are interested in this, if they want to pay me in Bitcoin or silver coins even, or gold coins, if it's something valuable, it's up to them. Just to make them used to the idea that it's completely natural to use anything else than the national currency, Norwegian kroner in our case then. And also, there's an ongoing discussion in the Bitcoin community. Should we try to improve the system which we have today, or should we just leave it as it is and make the transition on our own to the new Bitcoin system? And I know that Jeff Booth has argued that if you try to improve the current system, you only harden it and make it more harmful. I don't know if I follow him completely. I think it's important to put pressure on the politicians in order to make them facilitate a less harmful and a more promising transition from the existing system and into the new system. To sort of force their hands a little bit and try to spend at least a little bit of energy in order to make this transition a bit smoother and a little bit less violent than it can be. Because I think it's possible. I think it's possible to have a slightly better transition than if you just let the current system run its course and let it end in a total collapse. I think we can do something which it makes it impossible, perhaps, to avoid that hard landing, you might say.
This is funny that you should say this as the last comment, because there's so much pull on here. Because I think, I've written a lot about this as myself, and I think Jeff's point is that I'm putting words in his mouth now, but from what I understand of it, it's like the monetary incentive, the incentive for politicians to look after their own house and try to rob the system of as much as possible during the time they're elected. Is that incentive is stronger than we can ever expect, trying to change their minds by democratic means. So it is that bleak. And the thing I've written about the smooth transition, or a fast transition as opposed to a slow transition, is that what people are most afraid of is, like, if the transition is too fast, it's going to be violent. What they leave out is that we're living in violence now. We're being violated again every second of our lives. We're having the fruits of our labor stolen by violent means through counterfeiting. So the faster we stop that, the faster we stop the violence. Like, if you view the First World War as something that hasn't ended yet, it's a war between the governments and their subjects, then of course you would want this to play out as fast as possible, because you want to stop the violence. This is stopping the violence. The violence, we might not see it, but if you draw the vectors to their ultimate end, there's always the barrel of a gun somewhere throwing you in jail if you don't do what they tell you to do. And that's what we're trying to get away from. So that's the counter argument there, just to play the devil's advocate here at the end of the conversation.
The fast transition is something that I really agree that we need to have. So,
Great last, great closing comments there. Good setup for the next one. Since we're close to out of time, Rune, is there anywhere you'd like to direct our listeners to? Where can they find you? Where can they find your book?
Yeah, where can you find the English version? That's I'm interested in that, and I think our listeners are too.
Yeah, you can find the English version as an ebook and paper, a softcover on Amazon. So you can order it from Amazon, and you will soon find the German version there as well. I think perhaps in April or May or something, you find the German version. And you can follow me on Twitter. That's the most, And
we'll include your Twitter handle on the show notes.
Yeah, Rune Østgård. All right. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks so much again, Rune. It's been great talking to you. Really appreciate the time. And as said, look forward to interacting with you in the future. So this has been the Freedom Footprint Show. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for listening.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Rune. I enjoyed this a lot. Enjoyed this conversation a lot, and looking forward to seeing you in real life. Take care.
I agree. Same to you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.